Elegant Sea Urchin is an audio drama written, presented, and produced by Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would be awesome if you shared or supported us. And before the program starts, here's a fact. Orange is the color of hate that gave up, grew old, became jaded, and couldn't be bothered with more than the minimum amount of effort. You, listening, thanks, and enjoy. They said leashes were required, but mentioned nothing about collars. If anyone had caught me and Enzo, or was aware there was anything to catch us for, I wonder if he'd be put down. In no way is he vicious. Quite the opposite. Nothing like that bratty Yule Aya's pet rat dog that shivers constantly and jumps and bites at everything in sight. No, Enzo's just hungry, and he'll eat anything if I don't feed him often enough. One might wonder where I found such a faithful companion. It was back behind the mess hall. I decided to take an extended lunch. Maths wasn't doing anything for my future anyways. And I had no answer to what I was planning once I graduated end school. Grandmom thinks I could manage a hazardous materials plant or something, but personally I still don't know. I do know that the most important day of recent history had that perfect time of noon where the sun shines purple and showers the world in velvet. Everything is cold, and nothing feels like it'll be okay. Ever. Wrapped in that creamy velvet feeling, in the sparkling shade, I suckled softly on a fist of punch with not quite enough kick. I'd hardly eaten any of the wrap that I brought for lunch, but I wasn't craving seaweed like I thought that morning. And that's where Enzo comes in. I felt his steely eyes interrupting my violet shimmering after lunchtime, maw agape, salivating like this was the first time he'd been introduced to edible things. No matter how shaggy his fur was, I could still see the dimples of his ribs and the knots of his leg joints. So I tossed the wrap to him, the limp thing falling apart as it flopped against the ground. Two things happened as I closed my eyes, suckled, and adjusted how I laid. The wrap was gone, all the scattered bits, everything of it vanished, and, eclipsing the purple afternoon, Enzo stood over me. Panting, his quivering breath on my face, cold, sticky saliva dribbling on my forehead and cheek. The smell of his mouth was not of my wrap. No seaweed or spicy mayo even hinted in the coal and rotted egg stench that overtook my senses. More than his stink, his piercing silver eyes locked mine like only ferals do. My fist a punch that didn't have enough kick finished, I sat up. I hope you enjoyed my lunch, buddy, I told him. Even though I refused to look at him, I could still feel his breath on my arm and against my cheek, only amplified like acid dripping at my skin where his drool was. You look like a thoroughbred lunatic, so good job. I'm gonna go find safety in numbers and actually go to class. I stood with my pack, leaving the depleted fist for the scavenger. I didn't look, but I knew it was already gone. And I knew Enzo was following me. I could feel his bright silver eyes as the purple seventh hour I loved so much dithered to pink. That salmon sky with a peculiar blue horizon was the last thing I remember of the day I met Enzo. He's the only thing in my life that stuck around. I kind of hate him. Taking care of him sucks, and I like being alone. In spite of my outward opinion of him, something's just right about Enzo, though. Nothing like what I remember of Pop and Mum. Uncle K is there for me, and Grandmom teaches me all the things a lady needs to know for life that the institution keeps to themselves in their grandest homes behind their strongest bloodstone seals. Uncle K and Grandmom don't object to me having Enzo either, so I couldn't tell him to stay away for any excuse like that. The Waves broadcast caught my attention. Bring your pet to the grand opening. Treat your terror pet shop. We have everything a pet's chosen one needs, from food bowls, chew toys, food, collars, rune lock cages, you name it. If we don't have it, well, your pet probably doesn't need it. Come this weekend with your soul companion to the grand opening off I-363 near the South Mesa Mall. Leashes required. How perfect, I thought. I have this gray shaggy thing following me. Maybe I can make myself happy by making it happy by taking it to this new pet wonderland. Before the week break and the grand opening, there was an incident at one of the doorball games. Yes, even solo souls like myself show up to school games sometimes. The sky was tangerine over the field. The buffers were guarding their thresholds while the flashers and kickers strived for points. The teams were cheered and harassed, ours a little more than theirs, and like always, we broke out into chorus when blood was spilled. The stands were littered with the usual crowd, faculty, students, magenta after-images of the alternate dimension close to ours with several people in seconds off, parents and scouts from the government looking to sweep away any promising talent. And the blue lights of the field were flickering on when Henry Bonilla made his usual sexual advances at the preps in the stands. A lot of people have the impression that he wants to be laid with the hot girls on campus when he actually wants an orgy with all of them, girls and guys, and for them to hate him the whole time. Much like they already do, just naked. It's common sense if you're paying attention. And you might be wondering, what was this incident then, Faye? Everything as it's always been, I hear you muttering under your breath. Enzo's intuition led him to search after Bonilla shrank away from being ridiculed once again. I followed my gray-eyed, swine-snouted hound as it rounded the bleachers, huffing and snorting through the untamed weeds and bramble, some vanishing along the way when I would look away to the dying light of the horizon. The usual despair of a tomorrow filled me as I gazed at the bleak skyline. Like most of us, I wished I could die with the day. Enzo led us around the gym to the locker rooms. There I caught a hint of the sugar and powder stench that Enzo was obviously following, and then I witnessed Bonilla jerking off on some of the doorball players and cheerleaders' underclothes. My romantic desire to die with the day ended. Fuck the day. I prayed I could drop dead before my mind was subject to more. I left for the grand opening of the Treacher Terror's pet shop after the cloudy purple shine. This strange azure on the horizons has been bothering me all week. Our skies aren't blue. They never have been. Is it an effect of Enzo, or are all the claims of not enough pollutants really changing our world? Leash securely tucked in my pack, Enzo walked a few paces ahead of me. The shop wasn't as big as I expected, its architecture not traditionally sharp angles and tiered. It was rounded and rather squat. I waved for the entrance runes to open, but after a few moments I realized there were no runes. Enzo and I were simply inside. It was dim with a looming largeness where light faded to what felt like infinite nothing. There were registers before us, shelves lining aisles leading back into the darkness. It smelled like sawdust and dog food and coal. The coal might have been Enzo. For the first time since he found me, he touched me, pressing his shoulder against my thigh. He was warm, and that surprised me. "Greetings," I heard an afterimage say. Since I was a little girl, they'd been trying to ban interactions between dimensions. It's all over my head, but Uncle K says scientists are afraid our worlds could merge, ruining the climate and borders, claiming buildings, cities, and lakes will appear where other lakes, buildings, and cities are, merging and causing a chaos unknown to our existence. The person before me winked in and out, various shades of reds and pinks swirling like a mist as his essence tried to stay in my reality. When I could see him, he had a pleasant smile. His face was wrinkly, and that concerned me. Some of our lessons in first school said age used to change us, warp the body after the 30s. But we stopped that long before I came along. "Is that your pet?" He was looking at Enzo. Sort of, I replied. I explained the circumstances and said, so I figured I'd get him some stuff. He seemed to be looking over my shoulder at my pack, and several moments later, when he opened his mouth, he winked out of my experienced universe before any sounds left his lips. Enzo huffed through his snout and moved forward. With a handbasket, I followed and looked through the list I'd made. Food dish, claw clippers, brush, pet soap, chew toys, pet bed. I wasn't sure if Enzo wanted or needed chew toys, and it didn't matter. His first priority was food. His nose led us down the aisle furthest from where we entered. Rounding the end cap, a lady blinked before us, transparent, plump, gleeful, and rosy. As she asked if she could help us find anything, she pulled a treat bar from her apron and handed it to me. I stared at the thing. Where it touched my palm, I felt a cool roughness and could swear the transparent magenta was trying to turn a solid oaken hue. "We're fine, thank you," I said before she vanished. Handing the treat bar to Enzo, I looked at the packs of pet food. "Enzo, let's grab this last. They're like 3 to 10 kilos each." Enzo stared at me with his steely eyes, but I rolled mine and moved on to the next aisle. It wasn't until several minutes later, and I had gathered everything that wasn't heavy, when I realized Enzo wasn't with me. I stood confused. He had just picked out a blue plush cart from the toy aisle. "I told you leashes were required!" I jumped at the man's sudden appearance and tone. "Freeze it, mister." I reached into my pack, pulled out the leash that was kind of hanging out, and shrugged. "Go get your dog and get—" The red vapor around him, as he vanished, only seemed to amplify the anger he was showing. I hurried to the food aisle, furthest from the door. "Enzo?" When I turned the corner, I saw my companion laying on the floor, content, licking his lips. The aisle was empty. My foulest eldritch god. I don't curse often, forgive me. "Enzo, get up," I commanded. His eyes were like stars in a black sky, especially under the dim lights of Treat Your Terror Pet Shop. Enzo moved to my side, and we went to the counter. The 2 employees I'd met blinked into my perceived reality and were talking at once. A third man appeared. All were asking what would be done about most of their stock gone. I stammered. They blinked in and out. I shouted. Fragments of their words and elevated voices pierced the veil between our worlds. Enzo howled, a cacophony that rattled all of us to silence. The next moment, Enzo and I were outside, under a tangerine sky. And there was no Treat Your Terror Pet Shop in the empty lot with weeds and vines growing from the cracked pavement. No squat buildings with its round, non-angular architecture. Just a rusted fence and trash collecting against it. We ran home. I was shaking, and Grandma and Uncle Kay gave me queer glances as I hurried to my alcove. I could hardly breathe, and I felt numb, but so alive. Then I realized I still had the basket and everything I'd gotten for Enzo. He sat patiently, head cocked, twinkling eyes on mine. I laughed. I gave him his car plush and called down the corridors. "Grandma, can you pick up food for Enzo next time you're out?" We kept everything, the handbasket and its logo, the only reminder that the pet shop had ever been. Until sometime that evening, when I wasn't looking, it vanished into the ether. Bizarre as it is, since that day I haven't basked in the bleakness of our world. A life companion. Huh. This is a re-recording of episode 1. The following episodes are the original recordings. Give them time. The quality will ramp up again, I promise. Elegant Sea Urchin is an eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the Greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, here is a fact. Leagues of ocean are no barrier to those who are determined. After all, the leagues of ocean are all busy with their own aqueous threats. You, listening, thanks. And enjoy. There's rumor the peppercorns are building something. It's horrifying. The ancients of our society are claiming it'll cleanse our tangerine speck. Uncle Kate thinks the peppercorns are inconsequential. Grandma asked him why, and he defended, "If the peppers were doing anything important, Dux Jones would be embarking to meet with the proctors leading whatever embargo's got the trench in a maelstrom. It's now that we need to be looking to the hills, 'cause, you know, what's closer than the peppers?" And he went on to rant about his usual qualms with the world and keeping 8-legged cats off our streets. As far as the peppercorns, the lunatics, the Lunathians, it's impossible. At least, And that's what the unpopular kids were saying at lunch, and we all know the minority and unpopular opinion usually carries a note of truth. So their statement of impossibility means the peppercorns themselves aren't impossible, but actually impostors. Well, before I make such a claim, let me explain what the peppercorns are as taught to us end schoolers. The lunatics, the Lunathians, they're mutants that live beyond the great Moony Moss. Dozens of years ago, when we were changing our outlook on the fractured magenta dimension and the specific fear of reality colliding cataclysm seeped into the populace's minds, the peppercorns were attempting to observe the universe. It's claimed that their ancestors came from the universe instead of suddenly just having existence in the world like most civilizations. Weird, right? Well, anyway, I think the elders say their curiosity found something so fundamentally mundane that it changed them forever. Hence, being ugly, twisted husks, as far as the images in our in-school books depict at least. So what are they building? I don't know. The brown noses haven't gotten a fresh scoop, if you catch what I'm casting. The eldest of the elders are busy being shelled up, and all the other elders in our community know as much as us urchins. Actually, I heard over the waves recently that it's believed that ancients who don't become shelled lose most of their knowledge of their youth, meaning I'm probably one of the best sources on the subject, since I care marginally less than the rest of everyone who couldn't care less, or remember anything more, making me reliable because I have the least amount of bias. So here's what the peppercorns, if that's what they even are building. A bioorganism that thrives on pollutants. You won't hear the elders of the elders deny my idea, or the tendrils. They don't have a damn clue. I'm sorry about that. I keep forgetting. I'm not supposed to bless. The UV Wavecast let me have this humble, unused ripple on the terms that I'd not say kind blessings like fuck, bitch. Well, I don't know how long I was off, but I'll back up a little. Remember the doorbell game from a few weeks ago? Well, the doorbell players blamed the faculty. The faculty didn't know what they were being accused of until they were presented with a dozen cum-crusted britches. All the faculty inflated to a state of mental purgatory to contemplate existence, the shimmering sky, and the best ways to experience the most painful suicides, and how to scrape the memory from their brains because, let's face it, we're all too chicken to die. As someone who's gone through those same motions the day of the coming, I knew they wouldn't be able to block it out. And due to their reaction, the accusation was dropped. School has been canceled for the week. We can hear the faculty screaming from anywhere in the cove. I'm sure you can infer that no one knew who the ingrown assquill was. When I saw Bonilla the last day of lunch before the faculty's impromptu break, he was blue in the face, afraid I, Fable Lonorus Nox Rex, the 18th, would throw him in cold waters. I was gonna let Bonilla suffocate in his thoughts a little, but yesterday during our unscheduled break, he found me and Enzo at the shore. I was swirling a stick in an estuary, watching the pale peach algae and moss swirl and scatter. It was a lovely, still violet day, truest fit for the highest caliber, self-loathing. The nice thing about the shore is that even during vacation seasons, no one visits anymore. According to Uncle K, the restoration efforts are all focused on the parks and forests and trails. I remember when I was a little girl visiting the shores and there being murders of people. Stands for shaved ice, mushroom burgers, and those amazing fried bites of mystery substance. Nostalgia is one of the most unpleasant pleasantries. And it's all nostalgia because no one goes to the shore anymore. There's no smells of sweets and fried bits, no choking children acclimating to the spores, no people from the magenta fractured dimension that we witness attempting to play volleyball with us and bringing us that much closer to assured world colliding destruction. I don't think it really has to do with funding. It could be the wafting, dusty sex of the mossy expanse, but it's not like anyone's actually afraid of inhaling the spores. I mean, I'm not. Enzo doesn't seem to mind them. I don't know, but I visit the shore now and again, and while the moss and algae dusted up from my disturbances, and I considered the true toxicology of the spores and how fast it takes a neurolock to set in, I heard someone approaching. I found out Henry Bonilla visits the shore too. I stood and waited for Bonilla to say something. He merely stared at me. Plump pink face, squinty dead eyes. There's machines and procedures. His roundness is no excuse. The tax on obesity is pretty big. It's a wonder his family hasn't intervened. Although, when it comes to people like Uncle K, the help is a little more than some of us can handle. He said a lack of hunger was fine, that on average we all filter in enough nutrients simply from breathing. I didn't lose more weight than necessary when he came into and changed my life a couple years ago. But back to Bonilla. I could tell I could tell he was trying to figure out what to say. What kind of leverage can he force against someone who doesn't... When did you get a pet? I glanced to Enzo. A noticeably algae-less circumference round him amidst the shallows. His silver eyes met mine. Still feral, but his fine snout wriggled in a way that I was beginning to think meant, yeah, I'm listening. Or, well, probably more accurately, why are you bothering me? You've got it wrong. The stray found an owner. Enzo snorted in approval. Bonilla moved forward, asking if he could pet him. I wouldn't recommend it. Enzo sneezed, causing a cloud of peach particulates to engulf our intruder. Bonilla, I came here, and he interrupted me to ask Enzo's name. I let Enzo do his thing. How did Enzo get his name? Pulling my skirts up, I crouched down in the gently ebbing shallows, returning to my task of disturbing the moss and algae. This is kind of hard to admit, and it's the first time I'm saying this out loud, but I've been a little fascinated with living things. For example, Enzo hates it. My romantic inner monologues and watching him aren't what he wants at all. And then there's school. I've always paid attention to people, and some of my electives, were on zoology. But lately I've been thriving on watching people and learning more about the terrors. Don't get me wrong. They live boring lives, and certainly most of the terrors on our tangerine speck aren't to be meddled with by a simple little urchin. And I don't really care about the gossip. And Bonilla was speaking to me. I stood up. What? I'm here to be alone together with my dog. His plump features cast some sort of sadness, but he pointed to the murk that I had been disturbing. There's something there. I looked down to the still swirling galaxy of life, and my stick lazily spinning free from my grasp with it. There was a... I hope I don't get in any kind of trouble for this. There was a... Okay, I know this is going to sound bizarre, and you don't have to believe me, but there was a railroad spike. It wasn't rusty like a lot of metals tend to be. It had scratches of wear and seemed flatter on top than I thought railroad spikes came. I mean, there hasn't been a railroad in the cove for half a century. The highlands and plateau, they only finished deconstruction of theirs by the time I was born, so I picked it up. Bonilla was really close to me. I could feel his bated breath on my shoulder before he spoke. Funny seeing a fey that can hold cold iron. I elbowed him in the gut, only to get a quivering thanks. The spike was cold and heavy. It felt normal, as far as manufactured rail parts are normal. Enzo arched his head up to sniff at the ends that protruded from my grip. He took little interest after a brief inspection, deciding to turn his slathering maw back to the protozoan life. How do you think this got here? I mused, looking up and down the shore, into the banks to make sure no one was watching. Bonilla reached for the iron.
Let me see.
I pulled back.
Ice your hands,
stepping further in the
fish.
shallows, but he persisted. And the next step I took, my foot didn't find purchase, and into the murk I went. I wondered earlier what Neurolock did. I think from being submerged, I got a first-hand experience. Rose butterflies and pink swirls engulfed my vision. I couldn't tell if I was suffocating or learning how to breathe again. Maybe the heavy thing in my hand kept me grounded. Behind the flittering pastel pinks and golds and blues, I saw the murky brine and tangerine flecks of the shore. I saw a shape moving above. I heard the warped echo of a piercing howl. Darkness never set in, but the blinding pastel lights and sprites lasted a long time. I wondered where Uncle K was. Probably at his government facility below the cove. What Grandma was carving. Recently she had turned our kitchen bar into coral. She's so old. It's beautiful how beautiful she is and still doing what she loves. Grandma always said, I'm the inking image of my mom. I never knew my mom, but I kind of remember my dad. Glimpses of maroon and a green that reminds me of a hill I used to play on. In tall, skinny shadows. Cheshire smiles. And smells of oak and plastic and cinnamon. I think, at last, I died a little, but that's not really what I want anymore. This is a re-recording of episode 2. The last episode to be re-recorded will be episode 3. It means a lot that you're listening. Thanks. Elegant Sea Urchin is an Eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, here's a fact. Ultraviolet is not the end of the visible spectrum. It's just impossible to match your favorite sweater with X-ray. You, listening, thanks. And enjoy. When you seek something different from the rest of the world, I think that makes you visionary. There's been a lot of listeners, so let's be visionary. I've felt like a stranger since the blinding ecstasy of the shore. What's in my mind is new, like the blinding ecstasy from the shore has let me glimpse something intangible, something I can't name. School started up again. The faculty looked better. One head specifically seemed giddy to have been back. Uncle K told me in confidence that one of the faculty that works at my school spent 2 days in the desensitization chamber. That might have been the deal with that. I'm not rippling on the subject. Just hear the whole trickle. Uncle K has been weird since my day at the shore. Well, I've been weird. It could be that he's been weird since the faculty situation. I guess there's a lot of things that could be making this happen beyond my own inner revision when I really think about it. I asked Grandma about it, and she just said the old adage, who needs a date when you've got cashews? You know, since cashews exist out of time, it's like saying that if something happened, that doesn't make the sum of all things that happened stranger than usual. I trust Grandma. More than I trust Uncle K, but in the couple years he's been here, I just can't agree that this is a singular passing thing with him. Sorry, I'm drifting. To stop To stop rippling, maybe I should explain what he did. The first thing I remember from the peach and pastel yellow ecstasy of the shore was waking up beneath the hand-carved coral bar at home. Enzo and all of his shaggy, bony protrusions curled around me. His snout wriggled in excitement when I woke up, leaving a warm, sticky heart shape on my neck. I asked him how I got home, but he's never one for talking. When I got my bearings, I realized Uncle K was sitting on the other wall, watching me and Enzo. He didn't say anything to my question either. There was a thump clatter as I sat up further. The railroad spike. I stared at it. It chilled me. "What's the matter with your neck?" I was startled by Uncle K's words. While I thought he meant the snot kiss left by Enzo, I felt something else. A dimple or indent, going all the way around my neck. I was breathing. I felt normal, in spite of the trip the spores sent me on. But I didn't know. I grabbed the spike and went to our looking glass in the lavatory. What I felt with my fingers was confirmed in my reflection. It looked like I was hung, or someone was trying to crudely cut gills into my neck with rope. I looked down at the spike in my hand, searching my memory for anything. Maybe I remember giggling? I think... I could barely remember that Henry Bonilla was with me. But that was a start. I could ask the pervert what happened. Looking back up, I got a shock, seeing Uncle K behind me in the looking glass. His curly hair and gaunt features were writhing, like something within his shell was thoroughly distraught, or delighted. And he said, "Something has changed." Upon turning around, Uncle K appeared normal, his dark eyes transfixed. It reminded me of the first few moons he had arrived. He told me, "Go help your great mother with this afternoon's meal." And he left. He's been gone for the past week since that day. But I had something more important to get to. Grandmom arrived home soon after with a beautiful rainbow charp. I had the greens and the stock ready, and after a flash roast we were eating. Grandmom always brings in the best catch. The mahogany grain of the fish's cooked flesh was plump and juicy. The bones were a perfect complimentary crunch. I don't know how she does it, but Grandmom's fish bones are always perfectly brittle, cooked right before the point where they turn to a chewy rubber. My greens were improving, not the greatest compliment to Grandmom's flash roast, but getting better. And the stock I made, well, if you follow directions, it's hard to mess up a flavor. And we were both waiting patiently, the quarter-hour grace that all families offer their uncles when they're away for a meal. When I asked Grandmom, "Have you ever been submerged in the great moony moss?" Her glare at the empty spot on our dining slab turned to a smile once she was fixed on me. Her petite stature and pixie features always calm me, always charm me. I don't know if a lot of other family elders are as enchanting as Grandmom, but I always feel like I'm seeing her for the first time when she addresses me. And she said, as a young lady, it was common for them to engorge themselves in the moony moss. And I nodded and looked down at my barely eaten cut of charp. And I had to know, is it dangerous? Grandmom chuckled, saying, "Danger is an effect of what is done after the ecstasy sets in. There's little that endangers our livelihood. After all, you had a friend with you." I shook my head. Bonilla is far from being anyone's friend. Glancing to the ticker on the wall, Grandmom shoved herself up to begin clearing the setting, saying, "I know your mind is like the tide on the young Bonilla, but you should know I think it's a fine thing." I sighed, rolling my eyes, but before I could curse the smogs above, Grandmom added, "But that urchin is not the one who I'm talking about." I watched her hand as she removed my plate. I turned my eyes to Enzo, who was lightly snoring, napping before his turn to eat. After Enzo vanished the remains of the flash roast, I left with him and his shining eyes to meet with Bonilla. I didn't know where he would be, but I knew where his family chambers were. I lived near the top of the ridges of the cove thanks to a legacy of my ancestors and their contribution to the coast. The Bonilas lived near the caves in the deep valley, you know, the ones where you still find silt suckers scraping for one last high before being released by death, and where we find the bones of relatives and loved ones who were taken by the Pobbles and Heraklians. Amazing and terrifying creatures, the Pobbles. Did you know female Pobbles ovulate on command, so they can literally choose which male they want to bear their amazing and terrifying knits? Color me envious. I'm not looking forward to my 3 chances to bear an offspring. I've been to a couple of Grandma's friends' seating parties, and I do not like the spectacle of being on display for something that we had biologically changed an epoch ago to control the population. That's how society works, though. One side of two gives something for the better of all. As I'm casting these waves, there's a wonderful tangerine sky that's giving me those fading inklings of death. What was I talking about? Bonilla, yes. Zoth. Well, I went down to the dregs and found Bonilla's family chambers. It was pretty nice considering the lack of purple shine that penetrates through to the depths. I would argue that it felt like I was breathing sludge instead of the mere miasma I'm accustomed to in the high ridge. It's a wonder anyone down there ever has an appetite at all. And for being lined with labor chambers, everything was fairly nice, except for the bones left over from predators, and an 8-legged cat I saw digging through a rubbish bin, but it didn't notice me, and Enzo paid it no mind as well. And now, I wonder if he's dealt with 8-legged cats before. The Bonilla Hollow was oddly bright. I think there's something wrong. No, I said that before. In the moment, I felt the full weight of whatever the gnawing wrongness was. I fingered the iron spike that I had fastened to the vest of my dress. Looking at the Bonilla Hollow and how it didn't embody the dregs I thought the caves were, I looked down at Enzo, thinking on these past weeks. So much was happening. Maybe things are always changing. But I had something to get to. A first taste of answers, so I knelt down to Enzo, telling him that since he had a big meal, to be mindful and not vanish any of the Bonilla family's belongings. His shining eyes twinkled as his pig snout wriggled. I took this for a let's get this over with since I can't and probably wouldn't if I could tell you what happened, Faye. Entering the chamber, I was met in the Bonilla parlor by the resident uncle. He greeted me curtly and began wringing his hands once he got a good look at Enzo. Uncle 3, he introduced himself as. I had only heard through the waves about numbered uncles. He interrupted my musings, asking, "You must be here for the young Bonilla?" "Yeah, I am. I need to find something out." And so he said, "I think, Miss Faye..." Yeah, he knew my name. "You'll find out more than you anticipate." I don't doubt it. I anxiously shuffled my feet, then asked where Bonilla's alcove was. The channels through the Bonilla Hollow made me nervous. The tunnels were too long, or too narrow, but the residence didn't seem bigger than mine. Enzo resonated my thoughts, his bristled fur shoved against my thigh as we glided down the green, glinting, and faded blue hall. It was a frankly horrible sensation, like the glittering channels were writhing and twisting, making our expedition seem impossibly long for only being a trek to an alcove in a hollow. And in the back of my mind I saw his twisted features from the looking glass. I heard Uncle K say again, "Something has changed. Something has changed." Kicking an 8-legged cat would be better than this horrible swell within me when I turned to face the entrance of Bonilla's alcove. Eyes like full moons watched me as I stood at the threshold. The swell inside me burst into a dizzying vortex. The figure facing me was curvy, unfamiliar in a very uncomfortable way. My knees felt like splintering stilts, and the figure moved towards me, her face not too plump, but shaped in a way that reminded me. Her eyes squinting the same way Bonila's squints. Pink, rosy cheeks. Her. She was taller than me, and while I was never nervous before that Bonilla was larger than me, $dollars of the fractured magenta dimension, the stink of sweets and powder. I demanded to know, who in Great Roulette are you? My cheeks were red hot, and I swear my vision was wrapped in magenta cellophane. Faye? It's me, Heather Bonilla. A cheerful smile, full of anticipation, dropped to a sour, hurt, downcast gaze. Here, you're low tide. Having trouble meeting my prying eyes, she gestured. Sit. Ice your mind. This is the final episode of Elegant Sea Urchin to be re-recorded. The rest of Season 0 is a little rough around the edges, but like I mentioned before, the quality will ramp back up. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of the Violet season. Elegant Sea Urchin is an Eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, our oracle had this to say. Self-termination is not escape, nor is it cowardly, yet not heroic. It's simply a way to shorten your time around those who love you. You, listening, thanks, and enjoy. Bonilla gave me chocolate. Enzo wagged his tail. I don't know that it actually was chocolate. Chocolate it's a myth from text. Something about a cuckoo bean that went extinct. But this smooth, dark, brown, drop-shaped thing she gave me to eat didn't taste like anything I'd ever tasted before. It was sweet and bitter, very, very rich. I had slumped to the ground and was unconsciously breathing Enzo's rotted egg and coal stench for some time as I mulled over this flavor and the situation. See, listeners, I'm not so surprised by the chocolate. It's like the rail spike that was gently scraping against the ground as Enzo adjusted how he laid on my lap. What I really think, well, I guess I agreed with Bonilla. I was low tide. And before I could try to drag myself and Enzo and Heather out of the Bonilla Hollow, Uncle 3 rapped on the alcove threshold, saying, "Ladies, the elder Bonillas finished preparing the evening's meal." And Bonilla said, "Thanks, 3." As the uncle eyed Enzo before leaving, Bonilla began removing her skirts. Sure enough, where I expected to see a prick, there were no such parts. She was saying something that completely slithered past me. I asked what she said, and Heather replied, "I just thought I'd put on the matching dress to yours. Ought I not? There wasn't anything wrong with that, but what?" I stood, and as her blue flecked red wine dress was still falling over her, I grabbed her hand. "Come on, Enzo. I ate, and you can spare the meal since you live in soup." She said I always say that. And before getting out of Bonilla's alcove, I thought I caught sight of her mostly familiar features blush, her eyes opening wide enough to finally see what color they were, and that they were green, like a hill I used to play on. You know, a lot of my youth, well, I know plenty of you listening are older than me. I know I am still a youth, but when I was a little inkling, I had a friend. He had moved here from the Jagged Plates with his family and uncle, their family name Aya, their uncle X. Until this debacle at the Bonilla Hollow, it was the first uncle I had met past F. Anyway, the Aya in my learnings year was scrawny, pale, and red-crowned. His twin sister, Yule, was and still is a terror, but he loved her, and I tolerated her when we played, because I felt like he needed someone. Because I can feel it when I'm in the same class as Yule, that she feeds not on food, but on us. This isn't cannibalism like we learn about from the last great sustenance war. No, it's like she feeds on life force. She's Captain Cheer. Back when End School first began, she asked me to try out with her. It's weird that she thought we were friends, when only a year earlier, the boy that connected us had passed on to a better life. Wow, it's weird to talk about death since my opinion is changing. Why isn't the life we live right now better? I can't get sidetracked. I'll make a note to talk about this soon. I told her no, which surprised her because I was the one who danced a lot when we were small. You see, I was tall, like sculpted statue kind of tall. Meanwhile, her brother and I never really grew. I asked Grandma about this when I realized it, and she said the women in our family are always pixie-like, but I don't buy it. The older Ayers are lean and statuesque too, and meanwhile, he never got that big. She feeds on her pet rat dog that shivers constantly. She fed on him, and he vanished before we were done with first school. And those days were almost like magic. Grandma taught the three of us about older rune locks, how if you wanted to unlock them, you have to pay attention to the glyphs. It was mind-blowing learning that bloodstones aren't the only secure locks, to learn that there was a whole area of security slowly being left behind. Snot or saliva. Grandma said some even used earwax. And some of the most secure, like bloodstones, could be specific to individuals or bloodlines. And that these various forms of stones could be used together to make an even more secure seal. And we learned these things and played and ate on mossy green hills up on the plateau, where the purple shine is most dazzling, and where every breath isn't thick like cotton candy. And I think that's what we needed. We were about to get settled at the Bonilla table, the elder Bonilla smiling at us. His hair was genius wild, and he was a little soft around the edges. In spite of his fighting obesity, which was more obvious when I saw the minnow portion, was how, behind his eyes, I could sense that the elder Bonilla had likely lived for over a millennia. It's very terrible how the tendrils of government often suppress families, leaving one member alive until there's either a need for repopulation or they buy their way into having another child. I told the elder it was a pleasure to meet him, but we had somewhere to be. And he simply smiled, saying, "You say that all the time." Somehow, I had heard him say that before, but I know I've never met the elder Bonilla. He looked familiar, so maybe I had seen him at a doorball game or something. I couldn't place it. Why was all of this haziness swarming me now? I've been a regular teenager for as long as I can remember, never causing much of a fuss or falling in line except to Grandma's word. I'm not an indecisive or a particularly forgetful person. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The panic not having chosen what to write on my career path was a larger monster the more I tried to keep it out of mind. Hazmat jobs are a quick route to death. I don't want to die swiftly or young. I think Grandma knows that, but she can't figure out where else to place her suggestions. But maybe she's worried I'll turn out like her daughter, my mother, and be someone restless and scattered across the world. Or turn out like my father, too cunning and smart for the family's good. Or maybe those tidbits I've heard from Grandma are false, and she fears a career where I can think and challenge myself will lead me to a truth she doesn't want me to know. I told myself I was awful. Grandma isn't that deceptive. and when I came out of this spiral of frustration, I didn't realize we were running. We were far from the caves. I didn't let go of Bonila's hand the whole vertical jaunt. Bonila was breathing no harder or no easier than me when we stopped on the green hill. I collapsed to the soft green moss. The purple shine had long passed. There was no tangerine flecks on the horizon, no last light of the day. It must have been nearly the hate hour. End of school was at dawn, and I'd normally be asleep within the aught. Dark had settled, and the smog was rolling in, but breathing was so much simpler here in spite of it. Bonila laid with her head near me, her body off in some foreign direction. We were quiet, and I didn't know where to begin. I have a sponsor. I almost forgot to include their promotion. I forgot yesterday too. Here. Tenenbaum Bloodstone Brushes and Cleaners. They're the Cove's #1 seller of rune lock cleaners. No matter where or how your bloodstone seals are set, they have a cleaner to suit your needs. Manufacturers, as you know, suggest a minimum of regular monthly cleaning to ensure no excess buildup of coagulated hemoglobin, and often the makers of our most trusted, sturdy, and secure bloodstones recommend Tenenbaum Bloodstone Brushes and Cleaners be used once a fortnight. And here I'm supposed to include a part about using one of their products myself. I've never cleaned a rune lock. Grandmom always scrubs ours once a week by hand. She says chemicals make bloodstones degrade and the essence that makes them secure wane. But my loathsome listeners, you should definitely use Tenenbaum's Bloodstone Cleaners. And in the twinkling hate, I couldn't find any other way to breach the subject. So I asked plainly, "What happened at the shore?" Heather smiled, craning her neck to meet my eyes, and began after a soft sigh. Elegant Sea Urchin is an Eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, remember, your reality is not anyone else's. You have to live with this, alone. Because no matter the implant or mutation later in life, you'll never quite see things any other way. You, listening, thanks, and enjoy. Because of my recent regular wavecast, the school has asked me to be an announcer for the playoff and championship doorball games. Heather says I should do it. It's a great chance to be out there and possibly get scouted by the government agents. I don't think that's what I want, though. I only have till the end of this season to turn in my career path, and it's still blank. Don't get me wrong, Grandmom and, even though he hasn't been back, Uncle Kate too, they're both supportive of my wave casting. But more than them, I'm the one worried about an actual lifelong career doing this. The great casters have been doing this 8 times longer than I've been alive. Dreadful as a thought, I couldn't even keep a sponsor. Just think of the way that Dame Marin shares her sponsors, how she so simply convinced me to go to a particular pet shop. It simply rolls through her casts like a natural ebb. I don't think I could ever so seamlessly manage that, and I don't think I'd have a lot to say once I complete end school. I know these kids and can talk about them because I have to be around them all the time, not because I want to be around them. Like Aya. She's been giving me queer glances all week. Then there's this silt sucker of a kid, Ald, who came with me to the head's office and didn't think twice about accepting the same offer. Then there's the Cove's least effective bellhop in 5 centuries. Thad is plotted through the channels of the school grounds, kind of not like himself lately. All of them, well, I like Heather's company, and Enzo. I went and had dinner with the Bonilos. I like her dad a bit too. I think I specifically like the portions he cooks. I didn't waste anything, and he seemed to know to have extra made for Enzo. I don't want to keep drifting on about Heather, but beyond what I just said, I haven't paid much attention at school the past week except to be told about this chance to announce. I thought the heads were bringing me in to lecture me. Heather thought so too. As soon as I was out of the chambers, she asked what my punishment... There I go again. Let me jab you with words of steel. Heather left a letter to me in my pack. I found it at lunch during the purple shine, and it really whipped up a maelstrom. I laid there with Enzo until the last whispers of Tangerine were engulfed by the rolling smogs at 5th. I'd never read something so sincere written about me, and I'll never get to read it again because Enzo vanished the page. Heather seemed to have been waiting patiently from some unseen place because the moment the letter left my hand and Enzo presumably consumed it, she rushed out to throw herself on me. The accidental disrespect really sealed the deal for her. It was nice. Her warmth. The way she took the situation and ran with it, even though I said sorry for the letter. It made me laugh. She was crimson and gleeful, reveling in the disregard she perceived, and I really felt, I feel this swell inside me, like she's the moon to my tide. This is nice. Just chatting to myself about the things happening in the Cove. Getting a leaflet now and then from you listeners saying I'm doing a swell job. Why not keep at it? I think, yeah. Heather would love to sit with me as I announce the last few doorball games of our final chapter at N School. Maybe I can convince the faculty to let me wavecast the championship match. So, the shore. It happened all those weeks ago, and I'm sorry that I keep getting distracted. In fact, at this point, you're gonna be disappointed. On that green hill, in the dark hour of the hate, Heather told me that I fell. Well, we know that, and I experienced a lot of flashing lights and a spiraling high that whispered to me secrets of the universe. And my father, Enzo howling was the last thing I remember of the day. Okay. Heather explained that I was under the shallows of the Great Mooney Moss for minutes. She waded in waist deep and reached for me through the tangerine murk. The spores were too tousled for her to swarm for more than a few moments at a time. She said she kept sneezing, that whenever she turned around to step back in, Enzo was in the shoreline, and for the blink of an eye, he was surrounded by an empty space before a tide of algae, spores, and moss collapsed around him. This went on for what Heather thinks was a full 14th. Enzo was sat on the shore, starry eyes, not moving from where I fell.
Help!
Heather cried.
Please, Faye, don't die!
She hollered, asking Azathoth and his dreadful acolytes to save me from the murk.
At what cost?
she heard whispered.
The world, myself, fill the mossy expanse with angels or stars if you must,
she cried over the pastel wastes. There was a long silence, and my companions lamented. And when she had come to terms with my death, Heather cursed herself.
I'd live for her, you bastard observers.
There was a gurgling, or giggling, an evil cacophony, and the moony moss receded. Only my foot stuck out from the pit I'd plunged into. I didn't press her for details. Heather made no mention of Enzo's howl, and I didn't find out why there was that red indent around my neck. Someone saying such things. For my benefit, I didn't have words. I've been coming to terms with this desire to live recently, but dedicating myself to someone, like the uncles, even I'm not that selfless. Even with my spirited outlook, I'm just another scared urchin. Another one who'll probably never be that virtuous. I craned my neck to see her as we laid on the soft green mossy hill, her head still near mine and her body off in some foreign direction. I still don't understand why memory swears there was a Henry. All I could think to do was to show my gratitude. I licked her forehead, returning my gaze to the rolling smogs far above us. I could feel the heat of her embarrassment, or excitement, or whatever she may have really been feeling. For all that I didn't know to say, or from what I didn't know was running through her mind, or not knowing how hungry Enzo likely was, I knew one thing. We were alive. And that's much more spectacular. No, it's much more fulfilling than a moment's fame of a tragic death. Elegant Sea Urchin is an audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, our oracle had this to say: when things are looking their brightest, turn around and witness the shadow in your wake to be humbled, and carry on, knowing that each step forward leaves just a little more darkness behind. You, listening, thanks, and enjoy. Heather told me a story about a guy much like myself. Little did I realize I'd heard much about him myself. His story begins a century ago, born and raised a lot like any of us in the past few centuries. Had a loathsome family, an uncle designated sea. The family isn't from the cove, but a jagged plain with large enough of a valley to make tiers much like the ones here in the cove. This is where I expect some well-read older wave catchers to know who I'm talking about. He had little in common with the infinite lives we live. And though he picked up on the notions of older generations yearning for death, he rejected it. He rejected the romance of death and was outcast from his peers. He wouldn't make ripples until his 20s. He had a rough transition out of end school, being picked up for jobs he was incapable of or refused to do. When at last he took the things he held true in his heart and sat on ice over what he could shape those into. His first journey is detailed in Dux, claiming the title. Yeah, for everyone listening who didn't recognize earlier, the man Heather brought up was Dux Jones, the one all of the uncles hold in such deep regard, and all of the elders despise. I'd never really thought of him as a role model. His books are all about the unspoken fundamental hope that youth has around our chandering speck, about how we all learn to be loathsome and desiring of death by our parents. From his book, I quote, "As I've grown and seen my share of trials and troubles, I've learned that life is better left lived, that while we may have our strife and boredom as time stretches like a pinprick of starlight, that distance doesn't have to be spent in loathsome reverie of those who died before us." Maybe I never really thought about it. Dux is a title that is rather Ruthag, you know? Priests of Cthulhu, as waxing as they can be, would never take the title Dux. In our childhood, the Dux is always the outcast, the it, the chastised, the iced. Dux fable. It almost sounds as natural as an 8-legged cat hissing. Dux Fae. Oh. Heather took me to a pobble breeder over the week break. Enzo didn't come with us. The pobbles were my main focus, but the breeding plateau had many more things than cute terrors of unimaginable strength. The follyboons lolled meters above our heads, enjoying the warmth that drifted from our crowns. There were enough zings to trip every few steps. Awful little fast sprites with metallic shells that make us tripping on them inconsequential to their own well-being. They had rays gliding here and there. Oh, and there was a Delmander that appeared to be looking in 6 different directions with each of its eyes. Bizarre. They even had an 8-legged cat. The plaque said it was Tabby. I don't know what that means, but it was orange and striped and hard to see. The glass it was kept behind was horribly scratched from within. I couldn't make out the claws at the end of its long spindly legs, but its fangs and gruesome eyes were dreadful enough to startle me. I took shelter in Heather. Loathsome receivers of the tail end of this ripple, I want to talk about Heather and myself, but I don't know how much is appropriate to share. I don't know that she's okay with me talking too much of her and what we do with ourselves. And I don't know that you care about this bond of life we are slowly... Oh yeah, Yule Aya was at the breeders. I've spent so much time with Heather recently, I've kind of forgotten that loathsome people exist. I know I call people and things loathsome, but that's just a strange consequence of language, you know? Aya is someone I actually believe to be loathsome. And of course, Aya brought her pet rat dog that shivers constantly. And we only realized she was there because it yelped constantly. The zings, though half its size, plowed through it as they jaunted around. Aya ignored her poor needle-snouted micro-dog's plight and yanked it along with fake interest at the animals. The bellhop of the doorbell team was with her, not surprising. I couldn't help noticing as they floated around that Thad, the bellhop, was drained in a very familiar way, following Aya like the somnambulous ghost of a charp. I was back in the pobble pen when Aya seemed to have noticed us. Heather turned crimson as Aya shoved past her, taking Heather's spot closest to me from behind the gate. The bellhop loomed behind her, looking quizzically at Heather, seeming to come half to life. Aya was upset before words even left her mouth. "Well, do you have anything to say?" she asked. I didn't, so I looked at her, and then returned my attention to the baby pobble eating from my hand to make sure it wouldn't take any of my digits. The rat dog filled the silence with yapping. I like to think Enzo would vanish it without a second thought, just like she caused her brother to wither away without a second thought. One of the Pobble-nits took interest in it, trying to tear through the gate to get to its perceived meal. I wished it luck. I huffed, clearly looking for something from either Heather or myself. The fathom depths couldn't dredge up what she was so chafed about. I searched Heather's eyes briefly to make sure that she was pleased with the treatment she got. I don't throw her in cold waters much anymore. I think she both appreciates and resents that. Smog's above. You're both lower than Minnowbite. Come on, Thad. With that, a yank, a yelp, and a final shove. Her and the withering bellhop stormed off. I tugged on the knit's ears, eliciting delighted rumblings, then moved over to Heather. She was hanging on the railing, her head down against the top of the gate. I smiled. "You okay?" She replied, "Amazing." I took one of her hands. "You're pathetic." She found solace in me, and we giggled and enjoyed the rest of our week break. The first doorball playoff game came and went yesterday. I was late to Wavecast because of it, and they did approve me to Wavecast's championship, even if our team didn't make it. I actually, before the game yesterday, one of the heads took me to the district HQ. The seals to enter were beautiful, like you have seen. A priestess sat with me, one of his priestesses. She was very slender, almost too slender, and too tall, her hair almost glassy like slicked back tentacles, her dress like golden scales glinting green in the right light. And she told me, and I thought that was swell, but I had to ask why they needed to bring me there instead of just telling me. That was her name. Told me. So I asked if the thought I was best suited to Wavecast. She didn't respond with words. Instead, the priestess took reached to grab it from my startled possession. The reverberations of a piercing echo reached us, and I was outside, with minutes to get to the game. Enzo and I sailed as fast as we could manage to the field, the dying lights of the tangerine sky at our heels, the blue illumination of the field becoming brighter below us as we descended to my end school's field. Collapsing in my announcer's seat between a pasty silt sucker of a kid named Ald, who was announcing with me, and and Heather. And Heather said, "Here I was telling Ald you were standing me up." Ald scoffed, and Heather added, "I'm high-tied to see you, though." Elegant Sea Urchin is an Eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, our oracle had this to say. Take a number, stand in line, divide by 0, jump to the left, and look beyond the smog. If you see it, relax. There's nothing to be done about it. You, listening, thanks, and enjoy. Down the stoop flies KV, it's Mesa's Ditcher, it seems Cove's bellhop, Thad, clueless, and he does! He answers the door! Another sand dollar for the visiting team! And if the Cove doesn't get out of the murk, they'll be on ice! What do you think, Ald? You're absolutely right. I think our team's best chance is on offense, but Ald, offensive teams rarely take championships.
It is unorthodox, but we've seen wilder games from the home team, and speaking of, our Flasher just stunned Mesa's Gargoyle. Without their pivotal defender to tip the bellhop, Mesa, there it is! When was the last time you've seen all three anemics on a team charged to bleed together? The crowd is losing their minds, unable to break into chorus as the runes react. Do you hear it all? Two bells rang, and the thresholds are open. The Cove's Flasher's vanished. A starfish! The Cove takes the starfish. The championship game is over. After the trials of nearly losing the playoffs, the Cove adapts to overcome our weakened defense. Dreadful acolytes and idolaters of the fractured magenta dimension. I haven't seen a game won by starfish all year. Now the field would be buzzing, and there they go. The Mesa don't believe it, and it's turning into a veritable maelstrom down on the field. The crowd is thrilled for more blood. Here's the chanting, but wait, the faculty is trying to ebb the tide of blood, and are you courteously saying please? They're putting that on display. He didn't secure our central threshold once during the match. That's right, Ald. Mesa scored 5 sand dollars off his portal alone. The true pedestal belongs to our Flasher Cena. If she hadn't put herself out there, we wouldn't have stood a chance. Not only keeping up in sand dollars, but striving for that last push and getting the anemics the chance they needed for a chance at a starfish. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Loathsome listeners, I'm being told by a woman of the tendrils that our time for broadcasting is up. Thank you for this opportunity, UV Wavecast Incorporated. Thank you to the sponsors, Thermal Pens and the Cove Critter Control. This probably would have been possible without your money, but the adults thank you all the same. And I'm Fable Knox. To all my regular listeners, I'll be back shortly on my usual humble ripple. Everyone else, thanks for catching our waves. Maybe you'll hear us again in the future. With some listeners, that was amazing. I wasn't expecting to be that fluid at announcing. I mean, I have been practicing for a couple years, and the past week, all your feedback from my wavecasted practice has helped tremendously. But the Cove won, and that's more important. During the trophy ceremony, I saw a man talking to Cena, our pivotal player, the dreadful, dark, and handsome type that we assume to work directly under him. You know, there's fond tales of families being elevated by them. One family a century, we say. In my family, it was Null Voice Knox, my grand 8th great father. His nullship was created for his creation of 8-legged catnip. It's been around for nearly a millennia, so I won't go into the details. Interestingly, though, looking through his journals as a girl, I always found it strange that this nip stuff was all but forgotten about at the glowing dawn. It made life maybe a little too free of fear since the cat's infestation was controlled. I wouldn't know except by things I've read, of course, but there's enough to suggest in books like The Metropolis and reading between the lines that the big fears of our great-grand family's times were no bigger than our current fears. The peppercorns haven't been in the cycle recently, and there's a new concern that the smog's tempo is going to be changing soon from lack of pollution. Why were the rail systems removed if there was a projected concern of the smogs to be altered? Why do we let strange societies like the peppercorns go about tinkering and thinking in such strange ways? Well, those are questions Uncle L has proposed since being assigned. Wavecatchers, I think I broke something in Uncle K. I can still hear his last words to me, that something had changed. My own concerns are much more subdued. I think I'm gaining an appetite from all the activity recently. I'm afraid to wavecast after end school. I want to do something good, but I can't help feeling like I'll fail or that I can't do it alone. And while talking about loneliness, I need to bring Cena up. You see, though, wavecatchers, after the game, I went back to the lockers to congratulate Cena. She's one of the 3 girls on the team, so her and the 2 anemics from our team were in the lockers, and like usual, it was filled with the cheer troop. Aya, unfortunately, included. Aya had a wavio to her ear and was scarlet-faced, but I didn't care. I let Heather's hand go and greeted Cena. Heather was with me through the championship wavecast and of course came with me to the lockers.
I figured a good next step was to get a few interviews, try to be a proper wavecaster. And as I asked if she consented to an interview, she laughed. You don't ask for consent before talking about stuff in your wavecast. Why is this different? Before I could reply, Aya stormed up to her. Why are you acting like I didn't do an eldritch thing? And loathsome? Really? I glanced up to her auburn hair slick and scattered against her unclothed body of marble. Heather audibly sucked in. Sina groaned, turning back to her locker. Aya's dimples were far below her cleft chin, and she pressed. Don't you turn away. You're part of the problem, Flasher. I still didn't know what Aya was rippling about, but when I finally opened my mouth to ask, she continued, Sina, what do you know about magenta fractals? This filled something deep within Sina. This girl I've always admired for her calm, calculated plays on the doorball field whipped around with such rage her raven hair whipped against my shoulder. Don't you dare bring my pop's research up. I think it's safe to say that Sina's dad does some secret research on the fractured magenta dimension. But what did this have to do with anything? Well, Aya began to fill that answer, explaining, it's because of you that Faye nearly died. That Faye's a reply, which I cut off, blurting out, what? To Fable, don't listen to her. I barely know what my pop does for work, let alone any details or conclusions to do anything about fractals. I looked at her and could only see her great play that made us champion. I told Aya, even if her pop did do research, how would she and Aya cut me off? Just like you and your great father's work on Nib. I wondered where along the line of my life she could have known that. I've never taken his journals from my family's hollow. One of my reports? I never dove that far in. I don't talk to people much either. And I stuttered. How? It doesn't matter how, Sina replied, her voice laced with toxin. She's got Papa Tentacle on her side. And then Sina left. Me and Heather left. Whatever else Aya had to say, she couldn't chase us because she was still nude and I wasn't paying attention. Because it was true what Sina had said. And I was pretty frustrated that I didn't get an interview. Elegant Sea Urchin is an eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the Greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before the program starts, remember that sometimes it takes fading away to find who you really are, or what you missed along the way. We all experience the shock of knowing we missed something that may have been truly precious. Cry if you must. You wouldn't be you if it had gone that way. Hey, you listening, thanks. And enjoy. My time map was swamped. I didn't even realize it. This happened because in my last phase of end school, I'd been spending too much time with my head in the purple shine. And because I hate showing my work, there's a simplicity in getting everything done at once, though. 2 projects where I have to travel out of the cove, a few doctrines, and some ancient ritual recitements that I already know thanks to Grandma humming them through my years in first school. But I found I didn't have time for it. Listeners, I was sitting in the purple shine with Enzo, working on a doctrine about this ancient food called toast, when someone sat down next to me. At first I paid them no mind. I had 2 tomes with me, one that had barely survived the glowing dawn and was detailing how toast often had something similar to a coagulated ruck milk called butter and fruit preserves spread on it. Interesting stuff. I looked to the purple shine, suckled on my fist of punch. This one had too much kick, and wondered why we didn't have these crops. And that's when I finally looked at my company. Listeners, I want you to guess who it was. Good try. No. Listeners, wave catchers. It was Dux Jones. Jones himself was sitting beside me, scratching Enzo's head. Nox, this might seem fast. I often don't make sucker faces, but I know I was gaping. I need you to come with me. You're the apprentice I need. I mean, I'd seen pictures of Dux Jones before, but he didn't have the aged youthfulness of most elders. His hair was sandy and speckled white. His face had fault lines like he hadn't had treatment in decades. I've seen plenty of elders older than Dux who didn't have this. I don't know the words. Messy? I guess I'll just call his appearance Juffied. He wasn't Juffied like the old men at the pet shop that I once went to. No, it seemed like more time would cause his fault lines to turn into wrinkles, much like the old. But what he was saying, I had no time for what. He continued though. I know, Knox. End school, gotta get your praise from a tendril. He laid back, looking up at the purple shine. I closed my books, stuffed my doctrine in my pack, and laid back. It had been a while since I really took in the sight of the clear. This is a really nice view. I smiled and said, yeah. For a while, the only noise was Enzo, gently snoring, resting pressed up to me, still getting head scratches from Dux. After a while, I wanted to look over to make sure this was real. I don't want to alarm you, Knox, he said, right as my eyes landed on him, startling me. I've been catching your waves. I think you're the only fit. He sat up, and as the purple shine dithered to pink, he looked a little revitalized. Well, first fit this century. We're a rare kind. Isn't much payment to be had. Well, there can be, depends on the job. Did I need to finish end school? I know Uncle L would be furious. He's not as laid back as Kay was. Grandma might be disappointed, and that makes me feel bad. I wonder if Pop or Mom would disagree as well. I'd think Mom would approve of me drifting. No, not drifting. I'd be taking this restlessness in me and getting scattered across the world to ice it. Dad would probably hug me and offer a Cheshire smile. Smogs above. I'm making stories up like I'm in first school. So I asked the Dukes if I could think about it. Wouldn't be here early choosing you if I didn't expect you to think it over. Talk to Heather, or even though you're treating her strange, you'll, if you gotta. When you've decided, I'll be here, Knox. He did that respect thing we in the Cove hear about from Over the Moon, where you caress the temple and gently place your thumb on the third eye. I think they call it the touch of ink. And Knox, he added, taking one last look up at the dithering sky. Enjoy this view as much as you can before the golden season comes. I drifted for a long time like a cloud of forsaken detritus, arriving inevitably at Heather's Hollow. I wasn't alone, mind you. I'd never dived to the bottommost family chambers without Enzo to keep the wild pobbles and eight-legged cats at bay. I realized, after arriving at the threshold, that Uncle L had warned me about sightings of a smog stalker roaming the deep valley, and instantly dread clawed my back. Sina had reached out to me a few days after the Cove took the doorbell championship. She wanted to talk. That's what I thought of. And I remember talking to Sina a little while I was younger. I heard Heather talking, or singing, until it stopped. Everything was pink. Oh, Faye, I found you and Enzo outside my hollow. You were passed out again. Here, I thought you might be less faint with eating more. Elegant Sea Urchin is an eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the Greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And before our program starts, we have a message from an anonymous source. It reads, "While those who stay in their comfort zone lead a dull life, those who lack comfort in living out of their comfort zone are missing out on the simpler things." Hey, you. Listening. Thanks. And enjoy. It came to me before I woke up. Something that made something else make sense. What was it? Acute spells of post-sleep amnesia can go suck, Smog. Heather licked my cheek and kept her arms around me. "Are you feeling better?" I wasn't. And even though I hadn't been on a trip from spores this time, I was still Nreknok. There was something gnawing at the back of my mind. I don't think it had to do with a dream. I saw Sina playing with Enzo. He had his blue car plush. It's amazing to think, after all this time, he hasn't vanished it. It's really etched and pierced now, but he loves it all the same. It's amazing to think that I was able to make him a little bit happy, even if it didn't help make me a little bit happy. And so I asked Sina what was going on. She said, "I helped fight off the 8-legged cat. Your malnourished Q9 tried to bite it after it jetted on you. You're safe not because of yourself." What's going on with you,
couldn't
Faye?
hear this. I needed to get a fresh breath.
First Jones, and now an 8-legged cat? I don't remember. "Yeah, let's go. How about to the shore?" I said. Sina replied, "Fable, no. Here. You're high tide." "I am not. Here. I'm sick of the miasma down in the dregs." Heather grimaced and looked away. Sina got up and pulled me from Heather's arms. I was taken by her strength. She's a flasher. They don't deal with the Quarf, and don't have to train like the anemics, gargoyles, or the bellhops. Maybe I'm just weak from always lazing around watching the purple shine. But Enzo growled. It was the first time he'd bared his fangs, and seeing the ripples on his snout from Sina's aggression was startling. Sina dropped me, sneering, her eyes challenging the dim gray eyes of Enzo. "Fine," her hand thrown up. "Let's go to the shore." Uncle 3 was wringing his hands right outside the threshold of Heather's alcove. It might have been because of my mood, but I liked him less. And something about him and Heather stuck in the back of my mind. What were these ripples that I couldn't make sense of? But the elder Bonilla stopped us before we left their family hollow. "Girls, I know you're on your way, but sit and relax for a spell. I've got something prepared that even Enzo might come down from. Since it's apparent that more people than I expect hear my wave casts on the tail end of this humble ripple. Thanks. I'm just gonna cast like always. I'm not a brown nose. Sina and the elder Bonilla and Uncle El can suck nitro. We were given a really pleasant sweet ice treat, and I recognize the flavor as chocolate. Maybe the elder Bonilla had a tome detailing how to make chocolate, like I found the one that talks about toast. Sina seemed confused by the flavor, but decided to play blissful ignorance than to ask. It was silent until Heather said, "Familiar at all?" Sina and I both gave her queer glances. I nodded, and Enzo licked his maw. I told her that it tastes like something that shouldn't exist. The elder Bonilla laughed. "You're so right. As observant as the loathsome gods we bleed for, my girl." And I couldn't help but smile a little. I left the little wooden scoop in my mouth from the last bit of shaved ice in my cup. I really thought Heather was more observant than me. I don't remember if I've mentioned this, but she's thinking of becoming a brown nose, and I think that's perfect. They work hard, hear lots, and take a ton of hate when they do good work. More personally, Grandma is coming around to me wave casting.
Uncle L has even been in contact with the UV Wavecast Incorporated to get me on the front end of a ripple after end school. At the shore I sat, looking out over the pastel wastes. The day was dithering, and the golden season was coming. Heather and Sina sat with me. Enzo ran up and down the shore, vanishing pools of the mossy expanse whenever we glanced away. Sina began, "You're not the Fae we know." I stared at her. "I've only ever been me. You're the one that changed, Heather." I looked to her. "I changed?" Heather and Sina looked at one another. You were the same as you are, but rounder, not curvy. Male, you were Henry Bonilla, the denizen creep of Cove's End, and I kinda liked you then. I just didn't know how to. Heather didn't say anything, but she put a hand on my cheek. There was one wisp of someone from the fractured magenta dimension on the shore. I watched it, her, trying to figure out how I was the one. Was Kay talking about me when he said, "Something has changed"? I needed my mind off the subject before I got high-tide. What about the 8-legged cat? Sina saw right through my change in topic. She seemed to understand, though. Her reply was simply to point to the large pin I had laced through my dress across my mams. The pin I acquired from a very sleek woman of the tendril. Why would it ignore the smell of nip in my pack to try to get at this? I didn't want to unfasten it from how I had it secured since it was practically holding my dress on me. I don't know, but I don't think you should keep either of those things, Faye. So I tried something else. Heather, why does the Bonilla kinship offer chocolate to title heads? Heather's eyes opened, revealing those reminders of green hills. Faye, you know every kin has something secret that gives their line time. She was right, and I felt like a precious citizen for asking. I stood up and walked to the edge of the great moony moss, close enough for it to ebb on my feet. Down the moss line, I saw the person from the magenta dimension. "Hey, loathsome person from the magenta dimension, scream to the bastard observers with me." "Faye?" Both Heather and Sina called out. The magenta girl looked about my age, and when she looked at me, something felt really wrong. But what wasn't wrong these days? "You bastard observers, I'm not rippling around my life anymore. You don't decide, and neither does the tendril. Azathoth, Cthulhu, Nazid, Al-Azif, and anyone else out there, I dare you to enter my hollow, you bastard observers." "You dithering idiot." And I heard a gurgling or giggling. Behind me, I heard Enzo choking, and when I turned, I saw him spit up a mahogany rectangle. Elegant Sea Urchin is an eldritch audio drama written, produced, and presented by Studio Swoon as part of the greater Swooncraft Creative. It would mean a lot if you shared or supported us. Head over to elegantseaurchin.xyz for more. And hey, you, listening. Thanks, and before I tell you to enjoy, I am curious. Do you think I'm in control? They said leashes were required, and collars, but they knew what I've done, where I've been, And Enzo, who's nothing like Yule Aya's pet rat dog that shivers and barks at every fleeting shadow that's under the... Hang on, okay. It started with Aya. Her dimples were a little too low, like she was scowling while smiling. I'd finally taken time to listen to her now that end school was complete. She was the first of several people who demanded my time since end school was over. There was no time for the last days of Purple Shine before the golden season. But shouldn't I have had my whole life to spend doing this and that and basking in the Purple Shine? Here, Aya said I'd do right to go to the shore with her, where she saved me. It's been sad without me, like crawlers on the edge of your vision vanishing when you look to them, Aya said. At the shore, well, as we descended to the hill to the shore, we didn't say much as we went. I got the impression that there was a growing somberidity, and there shouldn't have been after the first part of our jaunt, I think. It's hard to explain, but that's how life is. Hard to explain, hard to find meaning in, and that's really somber. That's why we have placement and dreadful tendrils watching over us, I think. And we arrived at the shore, and for the first time since I was a girl, there was a shop setting up to sell bites of mystery meat. There were people from the fractured magenta dimension several seconds and people off from our own, running about, playing games. Enzo snorted and laid down where he felt was the place we should stop. And I asked, how? Before that, Aya said, my dad knows that you hear casts from the fractured magenta dimension. I didn't know others didn't. He knows, Aya continued, that you went there. I wasn't put on ice. Listeners, this was cryo. He knows, Aya said, that Jones is trying to recruit you, and that I'm going with you. Enzo snorted, then sneezed. But part of it is because of your wave casting.
I couldn't
But it's
take
because
this.
of you. I stayed silent. This wasn't the worst. Sure, null-sacked Aya works for him, but that doesn't mean that anyone too serious knows what I've been... Wait. She said it was because of me? What have I done myself? I'm no character, I just live my life. Jones, Magenta, the pet shop, Pobbles, Heather, Doorball, 8-legged cats. Somewhere in all of those things, I did do something. I picked my head up from my hands. How could Dame Marin cast an advertisement for Treat Your Terror's pet shop if she wasn't in the fractured magenta dimension too, then? Aya looked at me with sad eyes, her dimples below the cleft in her chin. Fable, that's her world.
Stay with me!
She shouted.
Don't get low tight now!
I rubbed my eyes, trying to wipe away the magenta cellophane around my vision. We had a few days left of end school, and Heather was helping me in the tower with my packed time map. There were two things I just wouldn't turn in, but what end schooler did turn in everything. We all have an idea of what's planned for us this late in our learning years, despite what we say we want in our career path. Grandma was telling me it took her since Uncle L was assigned to get him to start relating to the tendrils that I would be a strong wavecaster. Eventually. I really didn't like him at first, but Uncle L is doing what any uncle does for a kind. For that, there's nothing I can throw him in ice over. Uncle L even started building canals for me to wavecast later. Though he did corral some portable equipment for me so the Cove and whoever else listens can join me when I set out with the Dukes.
And up in that tower, Heather let me know something. Faye, I don't know how to say this easily. Let it out, mad love. She was quiet. Wrote a few things on the flyleaf for me to copy later. Gathered herself. I can't join you for your trip. I set my thermal pen down, replacing it with the fist of punch we were sharing. As I suckled, I took in what she said. The truth was, I had a feeling she wouldn't be able to, and that fact isn't the end of life as we know it. I set the fist of punch down. It's got a mean right hook. It's my favorite kind. I know. It's just, my pop doesn't have many years stored up. I know. The tendrils, well, they really want me to start diving in, become a brown nose in a couple years. That's really great, Heather. It isn't! She shoved the things on the slab in front of her aside, taking my hand. Hers was shaking, and her dazzling green hill eyes were terrified. I don't know how to express to her that she needs to find solace in things besides being berated. That's why I like her, I think. Because she's consistent. She's Heather. There's nothing about her or her father that I can't figure, and that's reassuring to me in this frightening life. Even so, I want better for her. I think she'll really make waves, because even though I've only known her for this single Violet season, there isn't an urchin in the cove who doesn't refer to her to find out what's going on. So I told her it will be.
How did you save me? Fable demanded. I knew I had to answer to get her back. Pop sakes, my God.
Calm down, Faye. It was help from Sheer, Aya said, not explaining a damn thing. When she saw my frustrated puzzlement, she elaborated. Sheer, my family's Kraken. A giant shadow blotted out the dithering pink of the dying day that I wished so desperately to die with. I only saw a fleeting tentacle before it plunged into the great moony moss. A plume of peach particulates cast up, and absent-mindedly I traced where the red indent had been around my neck. Ropey, hair-like tentacles that evolved to help Kraken have more precise interactions with us. Can you do that? Was it really your Kraken? I didn't want to be pulled through dimensions, and I stopped because I've been happy since the incident here at the shore. You've got an affinity for it, Faye. Part of it is because of your wave casting, but it's because of you, Aya reiterated. I didn't get it. She was saying Sheer didn't pull me through dimensions, I think. I told Aya about my time with Heather and Sina. I explained Heather, and Aya agreed with her and Sina that I was different. Sina has told me that her father was working with the railroad spike. Maybe not the one I found, but she found it very interesting that the day her father put it through a fractal test, I found it. But there's more. Enzo turned his head towards us. I doubt it was because of our conversation. And she was right. The pin I took from the Lady of the Tendrils was holding my hair up in a bun. I didn't know what else to do with it. And even though we have top-notch runes at my alcove's threshold, I don't trust to leave it, or the rail spike, anywhere away from me. You know, listeners, since the championship doorball game, Thad has deteriorated. I didn't fade while sitting with Aya. Yule, I know you're listening. Whatever our past has been, after we parted at the shore, I decided to give you a chance. I won't let the past Aya that I knew interfere with the Yule that you are.
But with the shadow of no voice still cast over us, it's not too murky why Mum might have followed her own current. And Jones could help me find my current.
And Yule feared that. My maddest father thinks Jones wants to uncover the veil shrouding the peppercorns. And that was a problem. I didn't know if that's what she thought, or if she was just reiterating what her pop thought. But there were voices from over the hill. They were shouting. It sounded like Heather and Jones. Get back? I couldn't be sure what they were saying, but Enzo got up, his pig snout wriggling. Heather reached us first. I was impressed with how fast she could jet these days. She began to say something about how we This is a brief interlude from the Swooncraft Creative to inform you.
I saw her on the shore of the Magenta. I think she's the only one who can really see because of what you say she...
Thank you. And now, back to the program. Grandmama's been on the ceiling for a while. She's been carving the history of the Knox in a beautiful sprawling story across the dining and living alcoves. She said she had traded the bar. She earned me half a century, and that meant a lot to me. I'd gotten a few years from the UV Wavecast and my week sponsoring Tenenbaum's Bloodstone Cleaners, and I was planning on that to carry me through the coming season. I was worried about a healthy future, but Grandma said that the Knox kin used to always look out for itself. My mum, the first to break in our lineage. But with the shadow of no voice still cast over us, it's not too murky why Mum might have followed her own current. And Jones could help me find my current. And Yule feared that, I think. That voice from over the shore, it was so fast, everything was so bright. A shimmering haze descended on us. Listeners, the smog stalker stepped through the dazzling miasma, its eyes piercing infrared, its calcified limbs knobbier and more pronounced than Enzo's. That's not the worst of it, though. Its cancerous skin. It's so loose it drags behind it. Like a skeleton escaping its blotchy, spotted flesh. Listeners, the most loathsome part of all of these eldritch abominations is the odor. The rotted egg and coal stench of Enzo is something you can get used to, but this was worse than a gangrenous tumor built up over the last century of an elder's life when treatment stopped rejuvenating the body. And Jones was yelling for us to run, but Yule and Heather and we were locked by the glare of this thing, and it was upon us, and it was Enzo who acted, howling a piercing cacophony that left the shore silent. Everything was dark. Even the bright haze of the smog stalker was snuffed. The looming nothingness above us, the aisles that were deceptively long. I snapped out of the lock and grabbed at Yule, groping for the wavio I prayed she had, ignoring her confusion. When I found it, I traced up and down the waves until I found where I remember Dame Marin's cast being.
We'll get back to that story, loathsome listeners, but first we have to spend a moment praising our sponsors. First up, back in order after their incident the week break after their grand opening, Treat Your Terror Pet
Dame
Shop.
Marin was
They've
casting.
got everything your soul companion could need. Treat your terror with food, clippers, bowls, toys, and more. Just past South Mesa Mall off I-363. Leashes and collars required.
The bastard
Of
observers
course.
knew I'd checked
Next
Yule's
up we
wavio.
have Tenenbaum.
There were flashes of panic in pink and red after images. "No, not you again," they cried. One of the employees of the Fractured Magenta Dimension screamed, echoing from the back of the shop. Far off down the aisles was the glow of the smog stalker. Enzo nudged my thigh, shaking but stalwart in his gaze. Jones sighed. "Get your Q9 some food, Knox." I whisked Enzo to the aisle I remember causing us a rush in the beginning of the violet season, as Enzo vanished hundreds of pounds of terror food. The plump woman, who I remember being gleeful and rosy, blinked in and out of my reality. She was clinging to the end of the aisle. She asked for us to help. I told her to keep quiet. I told her that I was sorry, that this thing appeared here with us. Enzo stopped consuming to watch me and look at the plump, not so gleeful and rosy woman. I knelt down. I told him that he was the best terror an urchin could be forced to have. In his gray eyes, I saw a maelstrom of understanding, an eternity of life unlike ours.
The dark place where only the terrors lurk, plains of smog stalkers, zeted foes of the tendrils, and foul creatures like my soulmate of a Q9 can survive. A place where the sky is ablaze, little lives, and each horror dabs within generations to consume more, faster, and more efficiently.
On the way to the shore, Yule told me about cheer, like I knew the years behind the words she was saying. It all sounded familiar. Then something she said really stuck out. Sometime around the start of the violet season, the lockers stopped getting broken into during doorball games. What would happen when the lockers were broken into, I asked. We'd find our clothes piled on the ceiling, covered in a little bit of viscous stuff. My heart thumped a little too hard, but I kept in my morbid laughter. Was it kind of musky, sugary, powdery? Yule stopped and lowered to scratch Enzo behind his ears. Yeah, I'd say sweetly musked. As she offered Enzo a treat and me a shroom chew, I had to ask, if you were to have an orgy, who would it include? I think she bit her tongue on her fungi snack. Red-faced and mouth stretched just a bit too far to each side of her cleft chin, she stammered, I would have... Where would it even be at? I think that's jumping the moon. You have to smog light a couple people, really find you, and then in the hour of the hate before you will... I don't care what elders think we should do with ourselves. Yeah, but still, Chill, Jitterfish. Would you include Heather? Yule gaped at me. I think that's the first face I've seen her make that wasn't flattering to her marble features. Well, you have to... Don't you both compliment each other? I told her that we do, and she thought something was happening, and I told her everything was going to work out. That Heather wouldn't come with us. Yule seemed to expect that, but reassured me. So I asked her about Thad. Oh, no, he's not leaving the cove. He's almost... She searched the purple shine as we drifted nearer to the shore. She doesn't want to admit it or get too close to talking about it. I think. Listeners, I get it. I think. I don't know whatever it is that goes on with her, but at least I feel better that I got close to talking to her about a conversation that could lead to finding out what happened to Judaiah. And I know that I'm still not affected by her. As we crest the hills overlooking the shores, she broke the silence. Missing you all this violet season has been like crawlers on the edge of my vision. You've always been in the periphery, but gone every time when I looked to anchor. I get that she missed me, but her words were a little too quantum after all my Zedded episodes through the violet season. In a blink, the space around Enzo and I was empty. No stacks of terror food. His eyes were like stars stretching across the farthest reaches of space. In those eyes, shining for aeons unknown, I think I understood why the peppercorns act, and think the strange way they do. It doesn't take the example of the Eldritch to see these pinpoints of light long enough, and want to know more. The doctrines that cover space beyond the smogs. It's vague. It's gotta be purposely uninteresting to keep us looking no further than the smogs. Because if they described the beauty that I found in Enzo's eyes, I doubt not that we would pierce the smogs above. Listeners, as I questioned even more about life on our tangerine speck, Jones had managed to cord the wrathful smog stalker. In a wretchedness I've never witnessed, it tore chunks of radioactive cancer from the sack of flesh connected to it, throwing them like crude biological bombs at Jones. At my friend. At my lover. I shouted, and Enzo growled, and its piercing eyes of infrared landed on us.
where I knelt next to my Q9. Then I declared, "Enzo, feast!" And my listeners, feast he did. I'd never seen anything go into Enzo's mouth. The vastness of Enzo was realized in that moment. Shelves, complete aisles were knocked aside by the girth of my Q9 as he consumed the smog stalker in its bulging, dazzling haze. My mind ached. My mind reeled. I sheltered Heather, and Yule sheltered me, and Jones sheltered us all. Enzo couldn't handle the smog stalker and its aura. There was no space light in his eyes, no gray looking back at me. His eyes were void. But rather than the desolate scape of what maybe the existence terrors come from, I could tell he was looking at me. The sack of pustules, tumors, and trauma hung out of Enzo. Heather recalled succumbing to the stench and falling away. I don't blame her or feel like she deserves to be iced. And Jones called out as I stepped forward. He said the pin was the key. As the quivering mass jerked and fought against the vacuum within Enzo, I reached for the needle from Anzio, the lady of the tendril, and pet my terror's snout. There was no more time. Whatever the smog stalker was doing made Enzo expand to the registers, and I knew he was in pain. This wasn't right. But maybe it would work favorably, I thought. My hair unfurled as I brandished the pin, and I thrust it into the corpuscular girth of the smog stalker. For just an instant, everything froze. Then it burst, and in a flash, a quaking magenta and golden static buzzed in all of our senses. At the center was a dark blotch, and we were at the shore. It was the hour of the hate. Sina had joined us, and somewhere between the smog stalker and the smogs rolling in, Yule, Heather, Jones, and myself couldn't stop reeling from what we'd been through. I think Heather recounted what happened. I couldn't hear much over this loathsome churning in my ears. Another stall was setting up for the coming season at the shore. My heartstrings plucked a tune of nostalgia. The first thing I'd felt besides Heather's warmth and the numbness of losing. Hey Heather, if that's a shaved ice stand, can you get us a platter to share? She smiled and jetted. Jones found himself recovered enough to switch gears. Urchins, I have to tell you, the trip might take a while. It's on the other side of our pink speck, Sina said. Yule glanced around. Will our suppliers work if we go past the Revo lines? Yes, Jones began before Sina interrupted. Daddy Tentacle never took you past the shelf. Sina, I'm not my beg-thuck parents. No, you're pure smelted slab such as means you've never closed your mouth and thought. Faye, Heather, they're not their beg-thucked parents, Yule. If you can't work together, I don't need either of you. The faults on Jones's face seemed deeper as they fought. I can't speak for what he hasn't said himself, but I get the feeling that he was lying and is depending on their help now. Heather was back, red-faced, but not straining like a version of her I once knew might have been. Faye, they said they won't be open till the smogs roll out in 2/7. Will you wait there to get us all the freshest shaved ice, my maddest love? Heather nodded and jetted again. Jones began telling my peers, in a timbre I didn't quite believe, that he didn't need anyone besides me, and started detailing how and where our trip would go. Sina and Yule listened, but what they didn't hear was him rippling,
the more he explained, the more useful they sounded. But what he really rippled around was the actual point of the trip and what made me so valuable. There was something he was hiding, something he needed me for when we reached the peppercorns, or maybe being his apprentice just meant following him around, but that's far less diabolical an idea. And truthfully, I couldn't bring myself to be that invested right then. I'd depleted my stores of carrying on completing end school, and Heather, and whatever just happened through the thankful smogs. Sounds good, I told them. Work out the details, I said. I'm gonna drift a bit, and I left. Sina started to call out, but Joan stopped her, something about my solitude and the right mindset. Not like I went very far. I watched the plumes of pink as people of the fractured magenta dimension winked in and out. Near where I sat, I saw a girl about my age. It seemed she was watching me. If I've been on that side of the fracture, does that mean she sees me as a pink wisp? But wait, she winked in closer to me, and I think we realized at the same time, we're the same person. Is she the fae that I took the place of? We didn't say anything. I think we were thinking different things besides the obvious that we should have expected this. As she flickered in and out of my perceived reality, she lifted her skirts, reached to her thigh, and pulled her rail spike out. She put a finger to her lips and pointed. I saw Henry sitting on the edge of the moony moss. He looked better, less round, smaller in general. But maybe being magenta and transparent made my memory of him not match completely. It seemed like he was eating shaved ice, and Magenta Faye got up and creeped up behind him. She turned to see that I was still being a voyeur and smiled before clobbering him upside the head and landing in his arms, spilling the ice across the sands. Nowhere was a fractured magenta version of a swine-snouted Q9. Did she ever have a terror? I shouldn't have gave in to Heather's desire to be used and sent her off. Even though the shore was alive for the first golden season since I was a girl, and Aya and Sina were joining me with Jones, and all of them were gathered on the hills to plan the coming golden season. And I had Heather, who was loyal, who I cared so much about, and who was at a shaved ice stand still waiting in a 2/7 queue for me, for all of us. Without Enzo, I feel really alone.